Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi Terry, it's great to have you here today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So Terry, tell us a little bit about you and who you are for people who don't know you.
Okay, so my name's Terry Galloway. My real name's Norman. So if anyone ever sees why it's Norman Galloway in the various businesses. So when I was younger and lived in children's homes and foster homes and stuff, obviously I didn't want that stigma of being in care. So when I was in school, I was Norman, and when I was in the children's home, I was Terry.
Okay.
Two kind of identities, and it's kind of, I still use both names, to be fair, but that's me anyway.
And tell us a bit about what you do.
So at the moment, we've got a letting agency, property management company. So we do, standard lettings, high street. We do a lot of property sourcing. We've also got a housing association. So we do a lot of supported accommodation for care leavers. We've got an employment agency. So we do Kickstart. We do a lot of employment for care leavers and workability support. Main thing that we're interested in is actual outcomes, actually like getting the outcome at the end, which is like if you're working in employment, it's not just about helping the young person to create a CV, it's like actually getting them a job. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
You do so many things. I don't really know. Do you just not sleep, Terry? I think.
No, I don't sleep. The thing is the letting agency is like a commercial standard business, and the only reason why I created it is so that I could kind of do the other more things that I'm more passionate about, such as creating systemic change within the care system. And without having a business that's kind of solid and generating revenue and income and stuff, you can't really do anything. You can't help anyone. So
brilliant. Yeah, it's such a clever way of thinking. And I think obviously your background's really been integral in what you're doing at the moment. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background and kind of share a little bit of that so people understand that in the context of where you're going with things?
Yeah, it is quite an interesting one because I'll turn up to various meetings in various industries, because ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, care leavers, that it's like the whole thing. It's not just one sector; it's the whole. It's health, well-being, housing, employment, mental health. It's everything, education, training, the whole lot. So I'll end up in lots of these different places where they might not know me or where I'm coming from, and they'll kind of think, what's he doing? Why is he kind of here? But the reality, is I want to change the system. And the reason is because I came through it, so by the time and ironically, I know you're in Devon, I actually left care in Devon. So by the time I'd left the care system at like 16, I'd lived in over 100 places, and that's like some kind of serious trauma going on there, and it wasn't just me, there's my sister and there's also my brother, and in order to experience like over 100 places, it's just constant in and out of care, in and out of placements, just literally. And the reason, it wasn't because I was a bad child or anything, it was just, I wanted to live with my mum, and the local authority didn't think she could cope with us. But from what I remember in those early days, the amount of kind of pressure they would put on my mum, right at the beginning, months and years old, they put us into care where, they put us in with like abusers, foster parents that was abusing us. And then, so if you're like a parent and your children, you've got the trauma and the loss of losing your children, and then they go into a place of safety, and then they're coming home on visits and saying, actually, this is happening to me in this foster home. Can you help me? And what if you're a mother in that position, and then the social services say, oh no, you've got to go back, and like, what would you do as a parent? You're going to get angry, aren't you? You're going to really butt up against the system, and then of course you've got kind of all the damage that's caused by all that. And for me, I've kind of got over it. But for my sister, she was a little bit older than me, so she knew more what was going on. So she was seriously heavily traumatized over it, you know. So for all the prevailing years after that, it's just in and out, and it's just, you know, constant chaos, you know, right through. You know, like, and then my sister, you know, she started kind of cutting herself and self-mutilation. I remember in the 80s, you know, she was on in the News of the World, or one of the main papers, this kind of aspiring journalist called Tina Weaver. And she basically did a story, and it was like labeled 101 scars. And that was like my mum crying out for help for her, who nobody wants to help, you know. Because I remember we'd kind of go to the hospital and they'd be just like looking at my sister in disdain, like, why are you kind of doing this, and just kind of not understanding. So I've kind of seen all this trauma and seen all this stuff, and seen how stigma and how messed up the system is. And then, of course, you kind of come right through all that, and then you get to the stage where finally you're free and you're not being told what to do by social services. And as a child leaving care, I just wanted to get as far away from them as possible, because, you know, one, they've done all this damage. It took me from my mum. But of course, I'm like 16, 17, I haven't got a clue about life. Do you know what I mean? I think I know everything, but I know nothing. But obviously, so I'm not going to want help. I'm going to say I'm okay to live on my own, but I'm not. And the reality is when you're in that situation as a care leaver, you end up kind of, you end up becoming vulnerable, you know, to society, to the people that want to just, you know, take the mick out of you, know, so domestic violence, gangs, you know, drugs, alcohol, you know, all that stuff. You suddenly become exposed to it, and because you're a young child, you know, and you've got no one really looking out for you, and quite often you kind of drift back towards your family. That, you know, that was the family that, you know, end up getting you in the care in the first place. So it kind of, you then start reliving all the trauma. And what then happens is, you know, the kids that come out of care in that situation, they then have kids, and then those kids then get taken and put into care. And then the whole cycle.
The cycle carries on, doesn't it?
It just carries on. And that's what happened to my sister, you know. So her children, she had 2 children. Well, she had 3. One of them died, death. And even that, you know, when the baby died of cot death, you know, trauma again, no help from the local authority. You know, the hospital, like Torbay Hospital, gave her baby back in a basket, walking around Torquay with a dead baby. So, you know, it's just like really, really bad, you know, the support for care leavers. So in the end, you know, she's just gone right off the rails, you know, crime, drugs, alcohol, you know, and in the end, you know, she was murdered by a boyfriend, you know, because she was vulnerable and domestic violence. So, she, you know, and when I saw her, you know, dead, that was like the most peaceful I've ever seen her for, you know, and it was nice, you know, because I saw her, it was just anger on her face. But one of the things that we used to kind of chat about, like a couple of years before that happened, I remember going to like a funeral with one of her friends, one of our friends who'd been in similar situations. And she's, you know, Hazel was like, you know, I'm going to be next, you know. And I'm like, well, no, you're not. And I've spent like all night kind of saying, no, you're not. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, she was. So that was like Hazel. Luckily for her kids, I kind of, you know, found out about 6 months into her kind of them going into care, and ended up, you know, having a battle with the local authority down in Devon. And I managed to get them out of care and get them on special guardianship orders, you know, and all that. So I've got all that experience as well. So I've got a lot of understanding of how...
Huge understanding of it all, Terry. And I think the thing that for me is so inspirational when I talk to you is the fact that you've used that experience and distilled it into actually energy to drive you forward, haven't you? And to make some real change in the system and the world about the way this is done.
Well, this is it, because, you know, everything happens for a reason, and there's, you know, what a waste of life and experience if we don't do something about it, you know. So what, you know, and I haven't even told you half of the stuff that's kind of gone on. The reality is I understand what actually needs to happen, and it absolutely needs to be systemic change, and it absolutely needs to be all of us. It can't be, you know, it can't be just me, it can't be you, it can't be a local authority, it can't be government. It has to be the whole community. So everything that I do now is about bringing people together, bringing communities together, and creating like a transitional pathway for care leavers leaving the system. And the idea is to kind of create this perfect model and push it out into government through the care review, and get it out there so that this is the gold standard. This is what should happen. And the reality, and it's dead simple, it's just, we just need to prepare these children as if they were our own children. And we need to, whilst they're in care, we need to be helping them develop relationships and you know, with the community, you know, so a social worker, you know, when they're 14, 15, they should be helping these young people get out there and do work experience and volunteering and just do the stuff that if it was your child, that's what you'd be doing. You'd be taking friends, and, you know, if you've got a friend who's got a shop, you get them to do a bit of work experience so that they get an understanding of the community, so that when they do leave care and they want to fly, because the young people, and they know absolutely everything, don't they? So when they want to fly, they've got relationships, they've got networks with the right kind of people. And all that, you know, in order to make that happen, we have to sort the housing situation out, which is kind of where we are with this, and also the employment, you know. So we've got kind of, you know, and the real great thing about it is, you know, there's massive, you know, real bad outcomes for care leavers. But what's actually happening there is they're just butting up against the system because they're not kind of, they're not thinking in the same way as people who haven't been through this trauma, because when you kind of go through trauma, you think differently. And I know that if you can reduce the barriers that they're butting up against, they'll actually outperform their peers. And we've kind of got evidence with partners that I'm working with, like in the States and stuff, because I've been like right around the world looking at what's going to work. And I know for a fact that if we create this system, they'll actually do better than their peers. And if you think about it, in the reality of the whole human history, it's never really been anybody that's really changed the world for the better that thinks the same as everybody else. You know, so in my heart of hearts, I think, you know, there's a lot to be said about reducing those barriers, and these care leavers can be our kind of saviors and future leaders, because differently, you know. So that's my mission, if that makes sense.
It's brilliant. And when we're talking about the housing element of it, because obviously we're talking about property investing and the property side of it, what do you think, what does housing for care leavers look like? What should it look like, I guess, is the question.
Well, it should look like what you'd want for your own children. You know, you're not, you know, if you've got a child, you're not going to want them to go and live in a shared house for a start, are you? You know, you're going to want them, like the average, like the unfortunate thing is there's such a disparity between the general population. You know, the average age that you know, children are leaving home that are not from care is like 26 years old. For a care leaver, they're leaving at like 17, 18, and they've got all the bills, they've got all the, you know, they've got the whole thing, they've got sometimes even the A levels and university, getting a job. It's all jumped on them at that kind of young age. The housing for care leavers, like the way I see it, is it just needs to kind of transition into kind of a supported accommodation model, but not in the traditional sense where you then have to have move on accommodation, because what's actually happening is there's like a bottleneck within the system, and they just get in placed, and you get all kinds of providers. And I'm not saying they're all the same, but there's a lot of providers. It's just for the money. You know, they might be doing exempt, you know, accommodation, they might be doing commissioning, and it's just like, they're like batteries, you know, these care leaders, and that's not what they are. You know, the human beings, and they have aspirations, and we need to kind of have an aspiration, like what is the pathway, what is the transition, you know. And for your investors and for people who are thinking of going into like accommodation for care leavers, you need to be thinking the end game, like what is actually going to happen when this young person gets a job and has got their own income. Is the housing that I'm providing suitable? Will that actually work? Yeah. And if it's no, then it's not suitable, you know. And the main one of the big issues at the moment is the fact that if they're on like in supported accommodation, it's exempt accommodation, the rents are that high that if the person gets a job, then they can't actually afford that rent, and then they have to kind of move on. So that's the bit that has to change there.
So it's about young people coming out of whichever setting they've been in, wherever they've been, at maybe 16, 17. Some people are coming at that age, aren't they? What should they be? You're saying that a shared house isn't where you think they should be. You think they should.
No, like 16 and 17, there should be, like we've got a campaign on at the moment. The government are just about to change the rules in September, to make it so that you don't have to care, because what you've got to think about here is like,
you don't have to what? Sorry,
you don't have to care, to basically what happens is, like, I was taken from my parent and they went to court and they demonstrated a threshold, and the threshold is that there's either neglect or future neglect. So what then happens is, if the local authority win under the Children's Act 1989, then they get a care order, and that care order lasts to 18. And what the government are doing right now is they've just brought out, or they're about to bring out, statutory guidance that basically says that they don't have to care for children that are on care orders beyond the age of 15. So what they're saying is that they can go into unregulated accommodation and basically not receive any care. Now, the thing is you can say supported accommodation, care, supervision, and all those definitions, but the reality is at 16 and 17, sometimes you need a carer to just kick backside and say, no, you can't do that. Do you know what I mean? And if
my son is 15 and 3/4. Yeah, he couldn't cope independently at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So the government right now, they brought that out. We've got a campaign. We've just issued, the Secretary of State a pre-action protocol. We'll find out next Tuesday if he's going to do anything. If not, then we're taking him to judicial review over it, because it's just not, it's just not right. I do get where the government are coming from, but there's other kind of options.
The driver for this, if I'm right, is the fact that there isn't enough regulated accommodation. So is that part of the driver for making this change, Terry, or is there some other driver?
From the kind of, well, the thing is what is making, it's children's homes, isn't it? Like they're saying it'll cost a lot more, and it's giving local authorities, and one of the big things that they're saying is that this is what children want. We've done research, and this is what young people are saying. We want to live on our own, but we don't know nothing at that age. And that aside, they haven't actually included, the actual, they've admitted the children that say, actually, we do want the care, but that's all a bit, bit deep.
So it's really important, and I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens as a result of that. But I think, so from a property perspective, what do you think that age group child should be placed, young person should be placed in?
They need care. They need what? To be honest with you, we've already done all this before, and we just forgot. When I lived in a children's home with the Together Trust, it was called the Boys and Girls Welfare Society. And I remember I was like 10 years old, and they had a little flat inside the children's home that you transition to. So really, we need to be having like transitional flats under the banner of regulated children's homes, so that it's all properly regulated, and then there's a proper transition.
So you have the same staff, the same that you're familiar with, the same people around you that but you gradually get some independence and you transition through.
Exactly. Like, there's no reason why that flat can't be in the community somewhere, and it's still getting that support, but it's under that banner. But you see, when kids kind of are going into supported accommodation, which mostly happens now, they get a higher priority on social housing. But the problem is the houses are not in the places where the kids want to live, and it's not suitable. So for investors, they need to really be kind of building houses that care leavers can kind of move into kind of permanently. And there's no reason why you couldn't have a model where it's supported accommodation for, say, a year, and then you just switch it over to general needs, once the person doesn't kind of need the support. But in terms of the regulated, unregulated, I'd like to see it come under the banner, 16, 17-year-olds come under the banner of a regulated children's home.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I do feel there's beginning of a move that way, don't you, Terry? I feel like it will come.
Well, I do, but if we don't win the judicial,
no, then that's completely contradictory to other things, isn't it? So
yeah. But a lot of it, it's just about presenting those opportunities, those solutions. One of the things that, because obviously, like I said to you earlier, I jump into different areas and it'll be different departments. And sometimes one department, like the DFE, Department for Education, they might not necessarily know what the Ministry of Communities, Housing, Local Government are doing, and I know, I was in meeting with the DFE the other day, and they're talking about doing some research of national standards for 16, 17-year-old unregulated accommodation, and their mates down the road in the MCHLG have just released them for over 18s. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, what? And the other thing as well is in the model, it's 16 and 17, but then what happens when they're 18? Because it's not under the DFE, it's like over there. So they're not thinking about how it transitions, across. And that's I think where the real opportunity is with the care review that's going on now, is to actually bring all these departments to understand how it all kind of fits together, which is the work that I'm kind of doing kind of behind the scenes, is to try and work with all these departments to kind of plough the way to get them to understand.
Brilliant. It's such important stuff, trying to get that joined up thinking, and it seems simple, but it's so complex to actually get everyone talking to each other, Terry. So really good luck with that, because I can appreciate that's a real challenge. Now I know you wanted to talk about the Kickstart program with us. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I, for years now, I've always known that we need to remove the barriers for care leavers, which is why I concentrated on the local offer for care leavers. So we've got this new website called Care Leaver Offer. So the Children's Social Work Act 2017 basically compels every local authority in England to produce a document and publish it. And in that document, it has to cover accommodation, health and wellbeing, employment. It has to cover a whole host of stuff for care leavers and helping them transition out of care. So it's in legislation, they have to do it. But what I found is that they've all done it and they buried it on their websites. And when you read the stuff that is there, it's all just wishy-washy. It doesn't confirm or deny anything. Right. It's just completely wishy-washy. So what we've done is we've made a website with every local offer in the whole country, and it's all on there, and we literally measure every area. So which councils do council tax exemption, free broadband, free insurance, priority for housing, do they do a guarantor scheme? So every measure that's important to a care leaver is on this website, and you can measure it against other local authorities. Also kind of is turned into a campaigning tool for young people. So we've got this guarantor scheme that we're campaigning about at the moment. So on the website will be all the policies on how these councils, because quite often, when you're dealing with some of these councils, because the different areas of the council deal with different areas of policy, they might not even know what a care leaver is. So you've kind of to give them the definition, because there's so many different definitions. So this website will have all this stuff on there. So it's kind of the ultimate campaigning tool and the ultimate bringing it all together so you can see absolutely clear.
We'll drop a link to that in the show notes, Terry. I think you're saying it's not quite published yet, but it will.
I've not opened it up yet because I'm just I keep improving it. So that's that. But ultimately, what that local offer is, it's the support that young person gets in the community. So they might get transport, like in Nottinghamshire, you get free leisure. So if you're in a job as a young person and you're kind of, if we give them a free leisure pass so that they can go to the gym as well as the job, it's going to help their health and well-being, it's mental health, and they'll get it as part of the local offer. If you was living at home, you won't have to pay that. In fact, that might be the only thing you have to pay, because you have to pay rent and all your food and all the rest of it. So all it's about is leveling them up. So all those local offer stuff helps them sustain the employment. And in terms of the employment, we're going to bring out a specific care leaver scheme that'll be national, that transitions young people. And we was going to bring this over from America, but then Corona hit, and then the government brought Kickstart out, which is like the mother of all programs. It's just so good because it gives a a subsidy to the employer, so the employer gets all the wages covered for 6 months for the young person. There's a grant which can help with the employability support whilst they're there. And literally all the companies that we're working at the moment, we've said to them, look, this isn't just about a bit of slave labor or, you know, just having that young person for 6 months. This is about you growing your business with this young person. If they then help you grow the business and you like them and they like you, we want you to give them a job at the end. And that's all our employers that are with, because I've got businesses and I know that good people are hard to find. You know, we've created 87 so far.
Wow.
And we've not even really started.
No.
I mean, we're probably going to try and get about 300 or 400, you know, before October. So if any like investors or people who've got companies want, you know, these jobs can be anything, you know, but they must be created. So, you know, by working with us on that, that's helping us create this kind of systemic change, because what we're going to use the Kickstart for is the evidence of how we can do it for care leavers a little bit differently, because unfortunately, the care leavers that we actually want don't qualify for Kickstart, which was a complete oversight by the Department of Work and Pensions, because they don't communicate with each other and they don't know, you know. So the way it works is care leavers, they're on care orders till they're 18. So if they can't get access to universal credit, which is the passport onto Kickstart, even it says 16 to 24. So, and they've recognised that, and they've moved that pace. So we kind of are working with them.
Oh, that's good.
Background on a specific care leaver one.
That's cool. So we'll put the contact details again in the show notes if people are interested in that.
Sorry, I'm just going on a bit.
No, you're brilliant. We could talk for hours about stuff, Terry, but we are running out of time a little bit. So I know one of the other things we were going to say was any tips or advice for property investors. So any final words for property investors for us?
Yeah, well, there's this big thing going on in Birmingham, you know, where you know, MCHLG have given the council like £1 million to audit all the supported accommodation and so forth. You know, for investors and you know, and who are thinking of going into that area, need to kind of understand how the regulator looks at the rent setting, you know, because, you know, any provider under 1,000 properties don't really get audited. Because of the situation that's going on there, they are getting audited, and everyone that's getting audited, you know, because of the way the system, and everyone thinks, oh, I'll create a company, I'll go under a registered provider.
Yeah.
Actually doesn't work, and it's not. It doesn't. You know, you better stay in as a CIC and not for a regulator, for a registered provider, because you can never, you know, you can never hit the rent setting policy. Because of the way it works and the way they're kind of interpreting like service charges and stuff. So just kind of try not to get caught up in that, and just try and think what is actually needed. We need properties that you can do supported accommodation, but that then turn into general needs. And I promise you, if you started presenting schemes like that, the councils will love it and support you, and you won't need to go under a registered provider, you know, because that's kind of what's needed. We want like outcomes, because, you know, these young people, they don't want to be sat in these like supported accommodation units for like 2 years. They just want to get in there, you know, 5-6 months, get themselves together, get a job, and then kind of move on with their lives, you know. So,
but stay in the same property and have a home is what you're saying, and that
yeah, and that, you know, so for investors, you know, teaming up with registered providers to actually build properties, not team up with registered providers to provide service support accommodation, because that ship's kind of sold. It's about what's coming, and what's coming is we need properties. We haven't got enough social housing, and really want to invest. There's no reason, you know, why you can't do that, because that's kind of what's needed, and that's what's kind of coming. That'll be the end recommendation.
Brilliant. Terry, thank you ever so much for sharing all your thoughts and your experiences. It's been great chatting to you today. Thank you.